When Jesus cried out, "It is finished," and took his last breath, John 19:30, the world wasn't just witnessing the end of a life. It was witnessing the beginning of an earth-shaking, soul-stirring transformation. What happened next wasn't just a ripple. It was a tsunami of events that changed history forever. These 6 astonishing moments after Jesus' death reveal the depth of God's power, love, and justice in ways that are almost impossible to comprehend. The moment Jesus died, something extraordinary happened in the heart of the temple in Jerusalem. The thick curtains separating the Holy of Holies, God's dwelling place, from the rest of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Matthew 27:51. This wasn't just any curtain. It was 60 feet high and 4 inches thick, a barrier meant to keep sinful humanity from approaching God. But in that instant, the barrier was destroyed, not by human hands, but by God himself. Why? Because Jesus' death made a way for all of us to come directly to God. No more sacrifices, no more priests standing in the gap. God was saying, "Come to me. My Son has made the way." For generations, the temple had been the center of Jewish worship. Sacrifices, rituals, and offerings were all part of how people tried to bridge the gap between themselves and God. But none of it could truly erase sin. That tearing curtain symbolized a revolution in how humanity would relate to God. It declared that through Jesus, nothing, no sin, no past mistake could separate us from him anymore. As Jesus gave up his spirit, the ground beneath Jerusalem trembled violently. The earth itself couldn't stay silent in the face of his sacrifice. Rocks split open, cracks formed in the ground, and people were thrown off their feet. Matthew 27:51. This wasn't just an earthquake. It was as if creation itself was groaning under the weight of what had happened. The Son of God, the one through whom all things were made, John 1:3, had died. Even nature could not remain indifferent. Think about it. Creation understood something that many standing at the cross did not. The shaking earth wasn't just a display of power, it was a wake-up call. The very foundation of the world had been shaken, just as the foundations of sin and death were being shattered at that moment. And doesn't that leave you wondering, if the ground itself responds to God, how should we? Here's where it gets even more astonishing. The Bible tells us that when Jesus died, tombs broke open, and the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. Matthew 27:52. Imagine the shock of families who had mourned their loved ones years ago, only to see them walk back into their homes. These weren't random people. These were saints, known for their faith and righteousness. Their resurrection wasn't just a spectacle, it was a declaration. Through Jesus' death, the power of the grave had been broken. This wasn't just a miracle, it was a preview of what's coming for all of us who believe in him. Jesus' death didn't just change the present, it rewrote eternity. And let's pause here for a moment. What would it have been like to see your grandmother or a revered elder walk through your door, telling you about the power of God? This event wasn't just about those who rose, it was about the message they carried. Death is not the end. One of the most powerful moments came from an unlikely source, a Roman centurion. This man, who had likely overseen the crucifixion, stood at the foot of the cross as the earth shook and the skies darkened. And in that moment he declared, surely he was the Son of God. Matthew 27:54. Think about the weight of this confession. A hardened soldier, someone who had likely seen countless crucifixions, suddenly recognized the truth about Jesus. This was a man who probably mocked Jesus hours earlier, as others did, yet something broke through his heart of stone. If someone like him could have his heart transformed in a moment, doesn't that give hope to anyone? It shows that no matter how distant or hardened a person may seem, the power of Jesus' sacrifice can reach them. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness fell over the entire land. Matthew 27:45. It wasn't an eclipse, it wasn't a storm, it was a divine statement. This darkness wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. It symbolized the weight of sin being laid on Jesus and the separation he endured from the Father. It was as if creation itself mourned the death of its maker. In the darkness, we find a stark truth. Sin is serious, but Jesus took it all, every wrong, every failure, every regret, and bore it in those agonizing hours. Let's think about that for a moment. In our darkest hours, when guilt and shame feel overwhelming, we can remember that Jesus carried those same burdens on the cross. The darkness he endured was so we could live in the light. The most astonishing aftermath of Jesus' death wasn't something visible. It was something eternal. In that moment, logically, salvation was secured for anyone who believed in him. Hebrews 9:28 says, "So Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many." Jesus didn't just die, he finished the work. He paid the price for your freedom, for your future, for your eternity. This isn't just history. This is hope. Hope that no matter how broken you feel, no matter how far you think you've fallen, his death was enough to cover it all. Here are 4 bonus facts you can't ignore. 1. The cross was prophesied thousands of years earlier. In Isaiah 53 verse 5, the prophet foretold that Jesus would be pierced for our transgressions. His death wasn't an accident. It was God's plan from the beginning. 2. The sacrifice was once for all. Unlike the repeated sacrifices of the Old Testament, Jesus' death was a one-time payment for all sin. Hebrews 10:10. 3. The veil's symbolism. The tearing of the temple curtain wasn't just a physical act. It was a declaration that the old covenant had been fulfilled and a new covenant had begun. 4. The day death lost its power. Jesus' death wasn't the end. It was the beginning of victory over death. As Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 15:55, "Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting?" Each of these moments isn't just an event from the past. They are a call to action for us today. The curtain tearing reminds us to draw close to God. The earth-shaking challenges us to pay attention to his power. The raised saints show us the hope of resurrection. The question is, what will you do with this truth? Will you let it change you? Will you take hold of the hope and freedom Jesus died to give you? Because the astonishing aftermath of Jesus' death isn't just about what happened then, it's about what's possible now. If this video has stirred something in your heart, take a moment to reflect on what Jesus' death means for you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful insights that connect the Bible to your life today. And remember, his death wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something astonishing.